are you wearing? Canadian.
Let's go Blues.
Let's go Blues.
To all you Blues fans, we're bleeding blue with you. Let's go Blues! Let's go Blues! Let's go Blues!
BlueNote Fan Report. Aloha, mahalo. I am Guy Benson, also known as the Hawaii Blues fan. Let me bring in my lovely, my beautiful, my talented, much more talented me co-host, Ashley. Hey, Ashley, how are you doing tonight?
I'm fine. How are you, Guy?
I'm good. I'm excited.
Me too.
I'm excited. I've been waiting for this for about 2 weeks. Normally, this time we talk a little bit about what we're going to talk on the show. We had an interesting day in Blues hockey, but I'm not going to do that because I'm going to let our guests help talk about that. Please give a big Hawaii Blues fan, BlueNote Fan Report welcome to the newest member of the Blues Media Group. The guys that cover the Blues. This is Matthew Defranks. Hey, Matt, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Ashley. How are you guys?
We are absolutely fine. I'm excited having you here, and thank you so much for joining us. First half hour, we're going to talk to Matt. So, guys, keep your comments and comments and stuff off so we can just wait until the bottom half, and then we'll open it up to questions for Matt. You cool with that, Matt?
Sure. Sounds good.
Okay. Well, first of all, Matt, welcome to St. Louis. Welcome. We talked a little bit off the air about how I kind of met you back in December when you first got to town. Tell us a little bit about yourself, growing up, where you grew up, and how you got into sports and sports reporting and eventually ended up in St. Louis.
Yeah, so originally from Miami, Florida, and I went to Notre Dame, graduated from there in 2014. Initially started my career covering baseball. Had an internship out in Anaheim. I was in Kansas City for a little bit. Went back to Miami to cover the Marlins for a little bit. Got moved on to the Panthers beat when I was with the Sun Sentinel in South Florida. Left there to spend 4.5 years with the Dallas Morning News covering the Stars. And then in December, right around Christmas time, moved to St. Louis to cover the Blues for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. So now done about 6 years in the NHL total. Looking forward to my first full one in St. Louis in September.
Now it sounds so. Covering the Marlins in Florida, you kind of covered them during the bad times, though, right?
Yeah, I was only there in was that like probably about 2018? Yeah, so I mean, there really only good times were 97 and 03, and every other time it's been a bad time. So, so especially there, I mean, that was when they were getting legitimately like 4,000 people a night. So. Not a ton of interest, and the newspaper there wasn't really going in the right direction. So wanted to look for a different kind of spot, and Dallas was a good spot for me.
Yeah, with Miami and Florida, they just had a rough time. Miami was the Marlins feast or famine. They either won it all or won nothing. I mean, and I would literally mean they're at the bottom of the league, correct?
Yeah, so during COVID in 2020, they had like those weird playoff rules and the wild card series and stuff like that. But So they made the playoffs that year. But other than that, the only two times they've made the playoffs were 97 and 03. And they won the World Series both years. Didn't win their division. So they've never won a division, but they've won two World Series championships. And after each championship, the team was properly dismantled soon after that. So they didn't really build a fan base, and even the new stadium obviously didn't help. So Maybe this year. I mean, they're playing a little bit better this year, so we'll see.
One question I got to ask you about, and I don't even know if it's there because I don't follow a lot. Being here in Hawaii, you're isolated, and when I say isolated, I mean isolated from all that home run celebration thingamajigger. What was that all about?
So that was put in when the new stadium was built, and the previous owner, Jeffrey Loria, who many Marlins fans do not like, he was a big art guy, so he had that constructed or put in, and it got taken out when Derek Jeter was part of the ownership group. And so now it's no longer there, but it was a nice little touch of character, I thought, in the stadium there that didn't really have much character elsewise.
Yeah, I definitely say character. So let's talk about you covering hockey. You've covered Panthers, you covered Dallas, and now St. Louis. Let's talk a little bit about that. Did you have like some passion for the game prior to covering them, or were you connected to the game at all prior to being hired or being sent to cover them?
I followed it, I would say, probably more as a casual fan. I mean, now it's so much different when you're in it every day, and it's been your job for so long now, for 6 years, 7 years, whatever it is. So I obviously followed it. I knew enough about the game, but when you're in it and you're covering it every day and you're knowing pretty much every single transaction or bit of news around the league, it's much different. So the interest was there, but I wouldn't say the in-depth knowledge that's required to be an everyday beat reporter was there at the time. Now I think it is, having been immersed in it for quite some time now.
You kind of sound like you followed the same path that Jim Thomas followed.
Yeah, I mean, he had a lot more established career before he moved to hockey. I didn't really have that. I didn't have 42 years or whatever he had.
Yeah.
So a little bit different, and a little bit the same, but happy to be here now and looking to stay for quite some time.
Well, I do like the parallels between you guys with coming to the Blues. When Jim came to the Blues, it was like, hey, Jeremy Rutherford just quit. You're going to cover the Blues now instead of football, and they suck. You came in, we were good, and now we suck. So hopefully it reverses a little bit. Ashley, I know you want to talk about today's news a little bit, so I'll let you jump in on that.
I mean, I personally am just excited that Sonny signed back here. I kind of expected it when he's going to the games, watching soccer, and he's in town. So I kind of figured that he was potentially going to talk to them, but I'm glad he's back because he's a little spark plug that we need.
Yeah, spoke to him on the phone earlier this evening, and that's kind of what he mentioned as well, that the Blues and him had chatted early on in the free agency period, that there was some interest there, but the Blues didn't really have the cap space to do much. So it went quiet for a little bit. What's today, the 12th? So it went quiet for 10, 11 days. And he went to Jordan Binnington's wedding this past weekend, saw a lot of former teammates, wasn't sure if they were going to be future teammates at the time. He thought that St. Louis, that door was kind of closed. And things kind of picked up yesterday. Got announced and signed this morning. And really, when I spoke to him, it was he wanted to be in St. Louis. They were pushing for that. They wanted to be here. He spends his off seasons here. He spends a lot of time going to the city games. He even saw them in Toronto this past weekend. He mentioned, on a 1-year deal, he didn't want to go somewhere he wasn't familiar with. He wanted to be somewhere where he knew the teammates, he knew the coaches, he knew the organization, the rink, the city. He knew so much about it. And when I talked to him, he's saying, well, tomorrow I'm going to Sweden and going home to see some family, figure out his visa stuff and things like that. And I was like, oh, so you're going to spend, a month and a half, 2 months there before you come back for training camp? And he's like, oh, no, I'm only going to be there for 2 weeks and then going to be back in St. Louis and get situated and everything. So he really enjoys being in the city and being around, and really happy to be back with the organization.
Yeah, I've talked about this with some of the other former players, how a lot of them really enjoy, especially from Canada, how St. Louis is like a small Canadian city. Does Sonny kind of get that with, I think he's from Scandinavia. I forget where he's from. My mind,
Sweden.
You got my mind slipping today. Sweden, right?
Yeah, Sweden.
Yeah, Sweden. Does he feel like he's at home here in St. Louis? Is it comparable to Sweden to him?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't talk to him about the parallels between Sweden and St. Louis, but he did call it his second home. He spends so much time here that I think probably in the last few years he spent so much more time in St. Louis than in Sweden. I believe his girlfriend is from here. That's why he spends so much time in the off season here. So, he does seem to enjoy it a lot, and it seems to be mutual. The city seems to enjoy him a lot too.
Chris Shockey says it's a deal where he can get a raise when the cap goes up. Maybe. I mean, do you think something like that could be in the works?
Well, he'll be a UFA next year when the cap is supposed to go up. So if he has a good season this year, it could set him up for a raise next year on his next contract.
Yeah, he's still relatively young, and he's 31, 32?
29.
Oh, 29. Yeah, I knew he was relatively young. That brings me to my question. Now, I write for Full Press Hockey. I don't know if you followed them or not. I'm working on an article, and I kind of feel like the Blues offseason has been slightly directionless. And this, to me, is one of those moves where I know everyone loves it, but I scratch my head because, as you know, Doug Armstrong said back at the trade deadline, we're going younger, 24 to 26. He's only signed one guy in that range since he said that. So I'm scratching my head a little bit. What do you think on that there, Matt?
Yeah, the way I understood his comments then was, he was going to be looking to trade a first rounder for a player that would be in that age group that had term on a contract that could mix in with the current group and the prospects coming on the way. So when I look at the deal for Kevin Hayes is 31. He doesn't fit that age group quite at all. But that's, to me, two entirely different things. They were going to have to find a bottom six, middle six center regardless in free agency. So if you look at Kevin Hayes as a 31-year-old center that they, signed as a free agent to a 3-year, $3.5 million deal, it makes a lot more sense than, if they traded a first-round pick for someone like that, right? And we know they didn't trade their first-round picks this year, but the way that I understood Doug at the time was 24 to 26 with 3 years left in the contract would be something that he would want to trade one of his first rounders for. So to me, these are just different baskets of the offseason. I mean, the league minimum 1-year contracts aren't really going to hurt much. There's really not really a risk there. It doesn't burn extra cap space. It might, limit some roster flexibility with having to waive guys and stuff like that in training camp. But if the worst is you have to waive Mackenzie McEachern and Nathan Walker, that's going to be a risk that a lot of teams have to take during training camp, getting the roster down. Yeah,
I kind of saw that a little bit. The other thing that I saw with this is, and I might wanted to get into it later, but I'll get into it now. Scandella, is he going to be back this year, or is he still hurt? Because he was hurt most of last year. He got hurt right towards the end of the season, when he was out for the rest of the season. And with some of these signings, I'm starting to think, is that going to be some money that gets into LTIR?
As far as I know, Scandella is fine. He'll be healthy to start training camp. A lot of last year, what he missed was with the hip surgery. And when I spoke to him late in the season, he said that's been something that's bothered him for a few years now. So when he came back, he felt completely healthy. Maybe not, the timing wasn't quite there. Maybe the conditioning wasn't quite there, but he felt good, better than he had in a few years. And I believe the injury at the end of the year had to do with a shot block in Nashville. So it wasn't, like a re-injury of the hip or anything like that. And every time we've talked to Doug Armstrong this offseason, he hasn't mentioned any injuries lingering into training camp. And, we've seen that happen before. I mean, Scandella's surgery was in September last year, and We've seen Perunovic get hurt in the preseason and things like that. So things do happen in September that prevent guys from playing in the season. But as far as I know, Scandella is healthy and ready to go.
I'll let Ashley go first, and I'll talk to you about my next thing. Go ahead, Ashley.
I was just gonna say, Guy. I don't really particularly find Scandella to be my favorite player, but when he came back from that hip surgery, I thought he was playing really well, which is a huge compliment for me. And it was a disappointment when he went down because he was probably one of our better defensemen at the end of the season.
Yeah, it's something that I've thought about this offseason when we think about this defensive group, and it's going to be pretty much the same as they had last year, right? Minor tweaks, not having Mikkola from the start of last season to the start of this season, and I think about what does a full season of Scandella and a full season of a more developed Tucker do for the defensive side of things? Does that help them with defending the net front and protecting the slot and those areas? Maybe it's wishful thinking, but those are just maybe some minor personnel things that could come into play with the blue line really the same as it was last year. Like I still don't really have too high of hopes for the blue line, and I think a lot of people would share that sentiment, seeing how they played last year. But if I am going to be an optimistic person, that's the way that I would lean.
I'll talk about the blue line in a second because I'm on ADHD. So if I got a thought in my head, it will fly away if I don't say it right. Ashley knows this. So the one thing I want to talk about first before I get to the blue line is Torpachenko. Now he has an arbitration hearing set up for July 20th. More than likely, he'll probably sign before that. But for the people that are watching that may not know how arbitration works, could you explain how that works, Matt?
Yeah, so both sides go inside of an arbiter or in front of an arbiter and present their cases for the salary that they deem is correct for the player. It can be kind of a nasty process sometimes because the team is telling the arbiter how much this player is not good and doesn't deserve the money and says all of those things. And the player, on the other hand, is saying how good they are and how much money they deserve. And so it can be a contentious process. So probably best for all sides if they get it settled beforehand. And, I think it's a little bit more common in baseball where it's you have a few years of arbitration and a lot of guys choose to go that route. And I think even before the season, Ryan Helsley talked about how much that impacted his relationship with the Cardinals organization. But in hockey, you really only have one or two guys a year that do it, and a lot of them don't even get to a hearing. So it's kind of a tough draw that it's the first day of hearings. So July 20 is the first day that the hearings are set for, and Torpachenko and the Blues are set for that day. So they have about 8 days to figure it out, or else they'll go to the hearing. But I can't imagine they're too far apart. Looking at some of the comps this offseason, if you're Torpachenko and his agent, you might be looking at 1.4. If you're the Blues, you might be looking at 1.1. It's not in the grand scheme of all the hockey negotiations. It's not a big bridge to build there. So I would hope that they get it figured out before arbitration. But we'll have to wait and see 8 days.
Yeah, so I mean, in the NHL, very, very few go to arbitration. They file for it, but they usually come to terms before arbitration hits. Sometimes it's one of those ploys just to not sign right away, let the team move money around, things like that. When you talked about how bad arbitration can be, I don't know how much Blues history that you've been connected to, but I'm sure maybe you've heard about Pavel Demitra and his couple of arbitration hearings went really bad for him. He would hear how the Blues would talk. I remember reading a interview with him, how the Blues would talk about him during the playoffs and that. And here it is. He's thinking this team loves him. And when that came out, it affected him really bad for a while.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of times it does get settled beforehand, and for players, it's tough to be in that room and hear everything that gets said. And uh, for I understand a few $100,000 is a lot of money. I do understand that, but it would be better for them to settle beforehand over what in the NHL world is a smaller gap than you'd really think.
Sounds good. Ash, you got a question before I talk about the blue line?
No, let's get to the blue line, man.
Okay, so I seen that comment that was put up about the Kerber on the radio saying that it wasn't the defenseman, it was more the team's defensive and the forward.
And that's something that I said all season.
Yeah. One thing what I think is a little bit kind of like that, but different. If you let's take 2020, 21-22, and then, 21-22 and 22-23, those two seasons, right? The 109-point season and the, 81-point season. If you take the 81-point season defense with the 109-point season offense, you take that and flop it, this team makes the playoffs. But if you flip-flop that, if you take this season's offense with the 2021-22 season's defense, I don't think the team makes the playoffs. You're not talking about as much of a difference in goals for, the goal differential. I think that this team's defense is predicated on how well its offense and its cycle is set up. And there's something this team did consistently on offense last year that really no one talked about. And maybe you noticed it, Matt, or maybe you asked about it, but I don't remember reading anything. Consistently, players would go down the wings, get to the top of the circle, to the middle of the circle, stop, and look for somebody to fire the puck back.
Yeah, I mean, I did not pick up on that entirely, but I think Chris's comment about the defense being on all five players is something that Craig Berube talked about a lot, and that's something that Doug Armstrong mentioned at the year end. And obviously, a lot of the attention goes to guys like Jordan Kyrou in those scenarios, but they do have a lot of forwards that should be better defensively. I mean, even Braden Shen's numbers defensively weren't really that good this past year. And even when we talk about the previous season, 21-22, and last season when they missed the playoffs, the underlying analytics weren't all that different for the defense in terms of expected goals and chances allowed and shots allowed and things like that. A lot of the difference came on both ends of the PDO spectrum, right? So in the year before, I think they were one of the best shooting teams in the league, and with Husso and Bennington, they had a pretty serviceable goaltending duo that got them through. And last year, the shooting percentage dips a little bit, the goaltending dips a little bit, and suddenly you're allowing a lot more goals. And I understand, even watching them, a lot more this past year, obviously the goals of the net front were up a ton. The backdoor tap-ins, the easy stuff right in the blue paint. But on a whole, the analytics aren't that different from the last 2 years. So curious to see how much of that kind of translates to next year, if it really is going to be kind of a 3-year thing, or if it's going to be a 2 years and they tweak some things, and maybe Mike Weber brings in something, maybe the goaltenders are a little bit better, maybe Scandella and Tucker are better, allow them to be better there, and allow the penalty kill to be better. There are a lot of factors that maybe could look towards being better on the defensive ends, but as Chris mentioned, the forwards are pretty key in that too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The thing that got me, I mean, a lot of people brought out that both Bennington and Grice just had bad years. And when you look at it, their numbers were almost identical. To me, that's not indicative of the goaltender himself. That's more indicative of the defense and team play. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Blues asked Jordan Bennington to do too much last year. Absolutely. I think anyone that watched them play would say the same things. And I think, the other side of that is that's what you ask him to do, though. You ask him to make some of the big saves. You ask him to bail you out a lot. So was he better than maybe the numbers suggest? Yes. Was he as good as the Blues needed him to be? Probably not. So I think both things can be true. And when the defense gets better, his numbers will also improve too.
You see, the problem I have with that, though, is the forwards slide way too much saying that, because when you can't even get out of your zone, you're hemmed in your zone because the forwards aren't chipping and helping get it out, then the goaltender is being asked to do way, way too much. The team needs him to be way, way more than anyone should be asking him to be.
Yeah, and when I say defense, I meant like team defense in general, not just the defensemen in particular. But yeah, I get you.
Mike, one of the things that I've heard a lot, and I want to talk about this because it's kind of, and Matt, do not think I'm calling you out, because I'm not calling you out. I'm
going to take it personally.
I'm calling out the media in general. We have seen over the last couple of years, and especially this season, where the media has leaked something that really shouldn't have been leaked, and it's caused some issues. With the Blues, you go back a couple seasons to Tarasenko, stuff about him getting leaked. This season, you've had a couple of incidents. You had the Josh Gibson incident, and then with the Blues, you had the Kevin Hayes thing. At what point do you think that the media needs to back off a little bit?
I don't.
You don't?
I think those are pertinent things to know as a fan. I mean, did knowing that Vladimir Tarasenko requested a trade impacts your knowledge of the team? Yeah, like I don't see how that is something that shouldn't be reported. Does your knowledge that Doug Armstrong tried to trade Torrey Krug, does that impact the way you view his work this summer? I don't think that they're sacred.
Well, I get that.
Maybe it's the position I'm in.
But here's the thing: it got leaked before they had a chance to talk to the player. While the negotiations were still ongoing, is when it got leaked.
I think that it would have been up to Doug to keep it a little bit more hush hush so that the media wouldn't get sound or hear about it, more so than it is the media reporting, because that is the job of the media, is to report. If they hear it, they report it. But if an ownership team or a management team wants something to be quiet, they can keep it quiet. And if they don't, they have a leak that purposely did it.
Well, didn't that leak come from the Philadelphia side, Matt, with who the players were?
I don't know who talked to who.
Okay, I'm just, for me, I just saw it as, I don't know, it chapped my butt a little bit.
I think that was more on management than it was on media. Media was just doing their job.
Fair enough, and it's just how it was. We're getting down to the bottom of the hour, Matt. If you don't mind, I'd like to open it up to some questions. Now, I know you've probably I know you do the ones with the Post-Dispatch, and unfortunately, they're able to filter out things a little bit better than I might be able to. So I'm hoping I can filter out the junk. But guys, I'm going to open up the chat room to you now. If you want to ask Matt questions, please keep them to hockey only and keep them legitimate. If I don't think that you're a legitimate person, I will not show your comments. So that's where it goes. Daddy Padre, who you might know, he used to be one of the Blues emergency backup goalies, says, hope to see you at the rink. He said, welcome to St. Louis, and we all second that. Let's see here. Hefner says, so signing Sonny, I see 2 spots on the open starting lineup. I think Walker and Torpachenko. What do you say? You put a tweet out about that today, about there being 4 guys or 6 guys vying for 4 spots. You want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah. So, if you look at the top 9 as, Kyrou, Thomas, Shen, Buchnevich, Saad, Hayes, Kapanen, Verana, and Blais. Those are 9 locks. I think Torpchenko is going to be, a lock to be on the lineup. Sundqvist, so that'll be 11. That leaves kind of one spot in the lineup, 2 guys on the roster. I think Alexandrov's going to be on there just based on the fact that he's not waivers exempt anymore. He's a young enough guy, still useful enough that he would probably get claimed if he does get waived. So I think that puts him on the roster. And if he's going to be on the roster, I would imagine they want him playing. So if he's the 12th guy in the lineup and you're looking for a 13th forward, I'm pretty much down to Neighbors and Walker. If they want someone sitting in the press box, serving as a 13th forward and coming in for an injury, I think Walker would fit that much better than Neighbors. And if they want someone that's going to rotate with the fourth line and truly keep guys fresh and playing, maybe Neighbors sticks up. The good thing about Jake Neighbors is that he is still waivers exempt. He can go down to Springfield without having to go through waivers. So a lot of teams choose to keep inventory at training camp versus risk losing someone, even though it is the best time to get someone through waivers. But if Neighbors has a good camp and the fallback option, so to speak, is to waive Nathan Walker, that's not a terrible choice they have to make.
Yeah, I think if you waive Neighbors, there's a good chance someone picks him up.
Well, he doesn't have to be waived.
No,
he doesn't.
Waive exempt.
He still has
exemption.
Exemptions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me see. Most impressive prospects.
Yeah. So last week was the prospect camp, and it's really I sometimes struggle with prospect camps because it can be the only time you see these guys live in a full year, and I try not to read too much into it, especially since none of it was at 5-on-5. It was all 4-on-4, 3-on-3 scrimmages. So having said all those caveats, Dalibor Dvorsky was without a doubt the most impressive guy on the ice. Really strong on the puck. A lot of skill in tight areas. Made skilled plays, cutting back on defensemen, finding open ice, protecting the puck well in the offensive zone. There was a point when, I looked and I was like, oh, well, Vorobyev is playing well with Dvorsky. And I was like, oh, well, Peterson is playing well with Dvorsky. And then, oh, Bolduc is playing well with Dvorsky. I'm like, well, I think just everyone plays well with Dalibor Dvorsky, at least in what we saw at the scrimmages last week. So he is, without a doubt, I think the most impressive one that I saw last week. Doesn't mean he's the first one to make it to the NHL. Obviously, he just got drafted. He's only 18 years old. They have guys that are a little bit older that are turning pro this year. Zach Dean, Zach Bolduc. Maybe Jimmy Snudderud turns pro after this year, going back to Minnesota for his sophomore season. So I don't know if I've seen Sitz for his first round picks on the ice at a prospect camp before. And that's what the Blues had on their final day. They had 6 first round picks from the last 3 years out on the ice there. So they definitely have some coming. And the thing about having 6 first is it's okay if they all don't pan out. I mean, we've seen that before where first rounders don't pan out, and we've seen them when they do. And if you have 6 of them and 4 or 5 of them do, you're still going to be in pretty good shape.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, the last time the Blues picked 3 first-round picks, all of them actually did really well in the NHL. Yeah. I mean, all of them won cups. So that's to me, kind of impressive. Let me kind of go back, and my ADHD is I had a thought and it went away. So AC Generator, he's got a 2-part question for you. So the New York Times announced that they will disband sports department in favor of using The Athletic, which they own. He wants to know if you think that other national or local newspapers will follow the suit in sourcing sports journalism to dedicated sports outlets, similar to Associated Press or Reuters are used.
Well, I hope not.
Do you see a danger in that, though?
Danger in?
Because The Athletic is a paid subscription, right? It's not free. So there could be a tendency to sensationalize things.
Every newspaper is a paid subscription.
More, it can be, yes, but the Athletic, the only way you're going to get it is through a paid subscription. You can't go buy it on the local corner like you can the New York Times or the St. Louis Post-Dispatch or
But the
something like
keyword
that.
is you're still buying it.
Okay, fair enough. And it's just for me, I don't know. I have a little. I don't know. I'm weird, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, they employ a lot of good people that know how to do their job, so I don't really have an issue with that.
Right. Let's see here. Like one of the things I was talking about was the Athletic release that Tarasenko was going to sign with Carolina. That was close to signing with Carolina. That was the only person that released it. Everybody jumped on it, and I seen so many things out there that actually said he signed when he hadn't.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not here to defend someone else's work. So.
Oh, I got it. It just what came. We talked about your. It says your take on prospect camp was positive. Who's going to make it to the Thunderbirds?
So they should have a lot of new players going to Springfield this year. Leo Loof wasn't able to be at prospect camp because he had visa issues coming over, but he should be turning pro for a season in North America in the fall. Dean and Bolduc should be down there. They do have very, very outside chances of making the Blues roster, but they have so many depth forwards and such a roster logjam there that they may be more of a injury call-ups during the season type of thing. So expect Dean and Bolduc to be down there. Marc-Andre Gaudet, defenseman from Quebec, is turning pro, so he'll be down there. He was at prospect camp. Trying to think if there might be another. I think Andre Heim was at prospect camp. He's a player they signed out of Switzerland. Should be playing in the AHL this next year. So they have a decent amount of guys that will be down there. And the way the NHL roster shakes out, like Mackenzie McEachern might be down there. Maybe is Jake Neighbors down there. Who knows? I mean, maybe Perunovic is down there because he is still waivers exempt. So they could have a pretty decent team down there. The big change will be in net. Joel Hofer coming up to the NHL, and then Vadim Zarenko and Malcolm Subban will be sharing the net down in Springfield. So I'd expect that to be pretty much a Lindgren-Hofer split from a few years ago, where you have a young guy like Zarenko and you have a veteran guy like Subban to split the net and share the duties there like Hofer and Lindgren did before.
Daddy Padre says, I think Doug still has a trade up his sleeves for D. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if he was going to do something, my take was that it would have been before the draft with all the draft capital they had, with the 3 first-round picks that they had, the late first-rounders to move. And we saw that he tried to do that in moving Torrey Krug and getting Sanheim. So I think after the draft, the Blues, I don't think really want to trade these prospects that they just drafted. And without that, they don't really have the incentive to unload a big contract on D. So I wouldn't bet against it because it is still Doug Armstrong. I still do have to get used to the way that he thinks, and he doesn't think like many other people in the game in terms of his aggressiveness and willingness to change his roster. So that's the only reason I would say it's still possible, but I wouldn't say that it's probable. And, if I think they're going to go with 8D and 13 defense or 13 forwards. But if they do go 7D, like we talked about with the forwards, maybe if you're waving Nathan Walker up front, maybe are you going to waive Callie Rosen on the back end, things like that. Like if that's the worst that happens, it's an outcome that you could probably live with it if you're the Blues, versus having to do a bigger move.
And I just had a real bad brain fart again. The Blues goaltending situation is probably the only part of their season that I'm not questioning. Are you good with the Blues goaltending situation?
Good. I don't know. I think I'm probably fine with it. We've seen Jordan Bennington before and prove what type of goalie he is, and we talked about his season, a few minutes ago, and Hofer I tend to temper expectations for young goalies. They do tend to develop a little bit later. He is he 22 years old? Is that what he is?
Yeah, I think he's 21 or 22.
Still a very young guy. He's only had one full year as a starter, and this is going to be his first full season in the NHL. He's going to have some ups and downs. I mean, we even saw during his short stint last season. He had those few. I think he had 3 or 4 straight starts after Bennington got suspended. He came up and played really well, and then he had that game out in California where
he was blown out.
Yeah, they kind of left him out to dry, but he went back to Springfield with a bad taste, and there's going to be some of that next year. There's going to be ups and downs with a young goalie like that. So I tend to temper expectations until we kind of get through a larger portion of the season for a young goalie. But the potential there is good for Joel Hofer for sure.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I like that. JT, what's happening with Collie Rosen?
Yeah, I mean he's signed. He's under contract. It's a 2-way deal, meaning he gets paid one salary in the AHL and one salary in the AHL and in the NHL. But he still has to be waived to be sent down. I would imagine he's going to be an extra defenseman, and if they choose to go with 7 defensemen, he might be on the chopping block. If they choose to have 8 defensemen, he'll probably make the roster. But I don't see him breaking into that top 6 unless there are injuries. But who knows? I mean, training camp is still there, and he'll probably be battling with Tucker, Bortuzzo, Perunovic for playing time down there.
Do you see them working the salary cap so they can roster 23, vice 22 or 21?
Yeah, right now they should have no issue with 23. The only way they would kind of run into that would be with injuries, and if guys are hurt for a little bit, not long enough to go on LTI, but short enough where their cap hit still counts. That would be where they would probably have to go with a 21 or 22 man roster. But as it stands right now, I would expect them to go 23, and they should have no problem doing that.
All right. So I'll real quick, just to let people know what Matt. Now, again, I saw a comment earlier. Are you okay with me saying Matt instead of Matthew, or would you prefer? Matthew?
Yeah. I mostly go by Matt. I don't. It's a weird quirk for me. I don't really like the way Matt Defranks looks as a byline, so I go by Matthew written down. But
okay.
Very few people call me Matthew verbally.
That's kind of what I thought, because in our other conversations you had never said, "Hey, please use Matthew instead of Matt." So I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, right, I think in St. Louis, especially with Matthew Tkachuk, I know he's a Matthew. I get a lot of Matthews versus Matts, but Matt's fine with me.
Okay, thanks. There's the difference between LTIR and IR. If a player goes on IR, it gives you roster relief, but not cap relief. If they go on LTIR, it gives you both roster and cap relief. Is that correct?
Yeah, and there are some other intricacies to LTIR, but the main difference is the cap relief, and the other one is the length of time. So IR, you're out 7 days. LTIR, you're out 24 days and 10 games. So it's a longer period of time, and then the reason a lot of teams don't like using LTIR is you can't accrue cap space during the season. And we're getting into really nerdy stuff now, but the way the salary cap works is actually computed daily on a prorated basis. So every day you're under the cap, you accrue cap space to use later in the season. And when you're using LTI, you can't accrue cap space, so you can't use it later in the season.
Well, right now I think I looked on Cap Friendly, and 18 of the 32 teams are in LTIR, will be in LTIR, or are in LTIR right now.
Yeah, it's really a big COVID flat cap era thing. Actually, I had a question in the chat on STL today about it, and I looked it up. The 5 years before COVID, I think there were 23 total teams that used at least $1 million of LTIR relief during the whole season. And the last 3 years, it's been 15, 16, and 15, I think. So legitimately half the teams the last 3 years have been using LTIR, at least $1 million of LTIR.
Okay. E. Guido has a question here. He says, "Isn't Sonny's body going to break down because of the way he plays? He's great. It's great he's back, but he won't play the same as last time. Fans don't see it that way. I don't know. I think most fans think he will. Is there something that I'm missing, or am I seeing things correctly? Where do you see the Blues ending up this year? Any big trades in the future?"
Yeah, I think Sundqvist is going to play the way he plays. That's why the Blues liked him to begin with, right? They see him as that big, physical fourth line presence, and it's hard for a Tiger to change its stripes, right? And it's not like he's. I know this might be a curse word around here, but he's not like he's Jamie Benn, who's playing 20 minutes a night and scoring. He has putting up 80-point seasons and being physical that way. This is a guy whose career high is about 30 points, and he plays 13 minutes, and it's a lot less responsibility and a lot less production that you'll lose if he does get hurt. And when I talked to him today, he did have it was a knee injury at the end of the season in Minnesota, and he mentioned that he feels the best he's felt in years right now, being over that and being healthy and everything.
I do want to add something, though. When Sundqvist was here before, he might only play 13 minutes a game. He might not put up a lot of points, but he brings a lot of spark to this team.
Yeah.
And we have in the history when he was out injured, we did not play well. When he was in the lineup, we played phenomenally. So he adds a certain aspect to our game, even if he is not playing Jamie Benn numbers, as you said.
Yeah, my point there is just, it's not like there's going to be a big dip in production if his body does start to go. He's not going from 80 points to 50 points.
Yeah.
If you're going from 30 to 23, much more palatable as if he still brings that energy and the physicality, the spark that I think Red Ruby really likes about him. A lot of Blues fans likes about him too.
Do you think that Sundqvist is going to be your fourth center?
That would be my guess. Yeah, I think it's going to be Thomas, Schenn, Hayes, and Sundqvist.
I actually had flipped Schenn and Hayes. Am I wrong with that, or do you think that it's going to be Hayes will be the third line center?
It doesn't matter. Those
I think
middle two lines are the same. Yeah.
I think those three lines, like those top three, can still be rotated. I don't see anyone being better than the other.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it depends on the construction of them. Like if it's Buchnevich, Thomas, Kyrou, then that's a clear top line, right? But the way that a lot of times last year things were constructed, it were kind of three even lines and a fourth line. And late in games, that fourth line wasn't seeing the ice at all. So if it is constructed that way, then yeah, it doesn't really make much difference. But even with the middle six, if it is Buchnevich, Thomas, Kyrou on the top line, and who knows if it will be that middle six is pretty interchangeable when you look at the way it's constructed. Verana, Saad, Kapanen, Blay, if you want to throw in Neighbors there, you can call them two and a half lines instead of a second and the third line or whatever you want to say.
Yeah, I'm with that. I could see that. The Blues did hire some assistant coaches, but I'm blanking out. What were your thoughts on the Blues assistant coach hirings?
Yeah, so they hired two. One is Mike Weber. He's going to be coaching the defense and the penalty kill. And the other is Michael Babcock, who's going to be a skills coach. He's Mike Babcock's son. So he's not going to be on the bench during the game like the whole staff had been in the past. You think he's going to be an eye in the sky up in the press box during games, and he'll be on the ice during practice and before practice to work on skills and stuff. And that was something that Doug Armstrong had mentioned as a possibility earlier this summer, not hiring two straight up assistant coaches to replace Mike Van Ryn and Craig McTavish, but hire maybe one assistant coach and one skills coach to work with the skilled guys they have coming through the system. So something that he talked about as a possibility, and it's something that they went forward with. Mike Weber, he came from years in the Buffalo organization, working with the AHL team there in Rochester, and had an NHL career before that. This is his first NHL assistant job. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how big of a difference he makes in the defensive structure and the penalty kill. But I think a lot of what Craig Berube talked about after they hired him was his ability to hold people accountable and be connected with guys and things like that. So I think a lot of his appeal to them seemed like it came from his interpersonal skills, for lack of a better phrase, versus tactical stuff. And obviously they still have to go over tactical stuff and things like that. But the way that Craig Brewery described it is his tactical stuff will fit into our system, but we also liked his skills in dealing with players.
All right, here's a question. I don't see this at all, but Shaggy is my New York Rangers buddy. Who do you see being traded away at the deadline from the Blues? Bennington, he's not. I don't see that happen at all. But I'll let you answer that, and then I'll say who I think it'll be.
Yeah, I mean, I believe he has a no trade clause, so
one more season.
Yeah, so he won't be going anywhere unless he wants to. And if they are going to be sellers again this year, which we'll see where they fall in the playoff bubble, if they're going to be out pretty early like they were last year, or if it's closer to the deadline where they have to make a decision. But they do have a handful of guys that can go. I mean, Verana, he would be a very appealing player depending on how he plays, right? Half of his salary is already being retained by Detroit, and it's a pretty reasonable salary at 2.65, I think 2.6 something.
Yeah.
And if the Blues want to retain even more on that, they can probably better their return for a guy who scored 24, 25 goals in the NHL before. So if they're out of it, he'd be someone. I'm just looking at the expired contracts, like they got rid of all last year. They have more coming up this year. Kapanen, Blais, Sundqvist, who's been traded at the deadline twice now in the last 2 years. So they do have a handful of guys that are on expiring deals. I don't know if Marco Scandella would interest someone, depending on how he plays during the season, if they're looking for, a defenseman to add to their blue line. So they have a handful of pending UFAs that could be of interest, and we'll just see where they are at the trade deadline.
Yeah, I'm with you. Those were the ones that I was looking at. I look at Varna and Kapanen.
Varna.
I'm terrible with names. Especially the French-sounding ones and the Scandinavian ones. I look at them almost automatically being flipped because of what you got them for. It's like getting a huge return on your investment besides just the playing. Unless you're in that playoff position, I mean, even if you're sniffing it, I would still trade him. Is that what you would think, or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll just have to see whether. I don't think the ROI stuff kind of impacts Doug Armstrong's thinking. I think they got the player for them to play for St. Louis, not to invest in them and kind of reap the benefits of their stock going up. But we'll see in February where they're at.
I kind of remember Armstrong bringing that up with I think it was Kapanen when they picked him up. If he plays great for us and we get to trade him, great. If not, we didn't lose anything to it. If I remember right, I think he said something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, they got him off waivers for nothing. The reason he was on waivers was because he's making, 3.25 and not producing the way the Penguins wanted him to. So there is an inherent risk there when you pick up someone like that. And it is, if you're able to flip him, that means he's played well. And now what happens if he doesn't play well and you can't flip him?
Yeah, true.
So.
I mean, that I thought that both of the pickups at the trade deadline, the three pickups that they had, Blais, Varna, and Kapanen, for what it was, they were good pickups.
Yeah, I think they're all surprises down the stretch too. You didn't quite. They're all kind of little mystery boxes. You didn't quite know what you would get from them, and they all did perform well down the stretch. Probably not realistic to think they would continue that into next season, but I mean, Verana's pace was a 41 goal pace since he joined St. Louis, and I don't think that's realistic. He's shown that he's scored 24, 25 goals. So, if he gets to 30, 35, maybe it's, you can kind of see it. 41 would be a little bit tough. Kapanen, and Blais, same thing. They really had outsized production to their career numbers. So the thing is that they're all motivated, and between those three guys, Hayes, Sundqvist, these are all guys who their endings didn't really go the way they wanted to last year. And, Doug Armstrong and the Blues are kind of betting on them to bounce back and be motivated.
Yeah, I don't say the Hayes surprised me, but it surprised me a little bit. And again, I'm going off what he said about the 24 to 26, but bringing that guy in for just a 6-round pick. Once it was only a 6-round pick, I was absolutely happy with the trade. But if you would have had to trade a bunch of players like they were, I think originally this was supposed to be like a 6 or 7 player deal, then I think I wouldn't have been as happy with it.
Yeah, they didn't give up anything really, and they got in Philadelphia retained half the salary, and so like we talked about earlier, it's essentially like buying a 31-year-old middle six center on the free agent market for 3 years at 3.5. So it's not a bad deal for a 50 to 55 point guy as he's shown in the past.
Well, we're almost at the end of our hour, man. What a fun hour it's been. So I got a couple quick questions for you. First one is, how would you grade the Blues offseason up to this point?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I hadn't really thought about that.
What would you grade their draft?
Yeah, I'm just gonna lump it all together because the draft, they're the prospects that I don't know a ton about until their names are called. So I'm not gonna really grade their draft, especially 2 years after it. More apt to grade it 2 years down the road. I struggle with this mostly because my expectations were kind of low. I didn't think that they would be able to do much, and they haven't been able to do much. So from that perspective, it has unfolded the way that I have thought. But part of me is a little disappointed that Doug Armstrong wasn't able to move money out. He's always been a guy that has gotten things done, that has found a way to do things and make impact trades. And I think that was going to be a big change that the Blues could have made for the roster next year, and they didn't. So a little bit, I think, disappointed by that. But the other half of that is you look around the league and not many of those deals went down. I mean, if you look at how many first-round picks got traded this year, and is it just, traded around the draft time? Is it just the Newhook deal that happens? I mean, if you're picking up a first and a second for Alice Newhook, what could the Blues realistically have done with a late first or two? So it's a lot of words for me to say. Maybe it's a C+ or something. I don't know.
For me, my only concern was the 4 defensemen. I thought that this was a year early to go after defensemen, because when you look at what our defensive core is, the four of the guys are locked up at least through 25, if not longer. And when you look at defensemen 3 to 5 years, those guys are right at that mark, to where it was just a year early for me.
A year early for what?
To draft. I would have waited till next year to draft defensemen.
Well, I think that the defensemen that we drafted were going to be 3 to 4 years out.
Yeah, they're going to be a while.
They're going to be a while. I don't see a problem in what he drafted them for. It's not like he used the first, pick as a defenseman. He got Dvorsky. So I don't have any issues otherwise.
Well, when I look at it, you look at our defensive core, you've got Parayko through 2030. I think, oh man, I am blanking out.
Krug and Falk.
Yeah, one of them's till 2029. And then the other two, I think, are till 2028. Right? And when you're looking at these guys, and then you have the guys that are still in the system now, when these guys would be ready, there may not be a space for them. That's why I thought it was a year early.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I think Krug and Falk are signed for 4 more years. Theo Lindstein, who was the first-round defenseman that was picked, let's say on an optimistic level, he's in the NHL in 3 years. That's, as a rookie 21-year-old in the NHL, it's not really a concern of mine. Yeah, you're not going to be expecting
top line.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I'm weird. Couple questions, a couple last-second questions for you before we let you go. John Hefner put this up earlier. Who is your favorite Notre Dame player in the NHL?
It's a good question. I think the one that comes to mind first would probably be Anders Lee. We were there at the same time. He's a pretty good dude. One of my roommates in college knew him pretty well. They were athletes, so they saw each other a lot, and he's been a nice guy to deal with. When I cross paths with him in the NHL, I'll say hi to him and remind him that I went to Notre Dame, and we'll have a nice little chat. So he's been a nice guy to talk to, and I actually had a nice chat with Paul Fisher, one of the Blues draft picks who's going to Notre Dame. We talked about the school a little bit last week.
One last question. I think this is a great one. Moving to St. Louis, what's your favorite food?
I mean, can it be anything other than T-Ravs? I think.
Oh, no, you're banned.
Why?
No, he's not. T-Ravs are great.
Yeah.
Do you not like T-Ravs?
Oh, no. I thought you said the opposite. I thought you said you didn't like them. I heard it wrong.
Oh, yeah. No. I think that's a universally liked food.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I enjoy it.
What about emos?
I probably am a weird person that doesn't feel strongly either way on emos.
Took me a few years too.
Like I'm not going to be craving it and going out and getting it, but if someone gets it, I'm not going to, hold my nose and walk away.
Give it a couple years. You'll crave it.
Yeah. I'm kind of, it is different pizza, but I don't really have strong feelings towards it.
I guess the last one for me, and one of my favorites, is pork steaks. You had any pork steaks yet?
Oh, yeah. I think you said sports steaks. I was like, I'm not familiar with sports steaks.
Sorry. Pork steaks, yeah.
Yes, I have had pork steaks. I'm just stunned at how cheap they are, to be honest.
Hey, I had them. I had some from, because when I'm staying in Airbnbs, you can't always cook, so I got them from Schnucks, and they're pretty good to me. Again, Matt, I want to say thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you could stand by, I'd like to talk to you offline real quick. Ash, thanks for coming on. Any last thoughts there, Ashley?
Nope, I'm good. We covered it all.
Matt, any last thoughts before we go away?
No, thanks for having me. It's fun.
All right. Hopefully we'll have you on again. Guys, this is Guy, the Y Blues fan, for Matt Defranks of the Post-Dispatch. Check him out there and at stltoday.com. Ashley Jones, my co-host. We can't wait to see you at the season. Should be back next week. I've got a lot going on, so I may not be doing the show as much as I've been doing it. So thank you so much. This is Guy, the Y Blues fan. And what do we always say, boys? And now I can't find my boys. There we go.
To all you Blues fans, we're bleeding blue with you. Let's go Blues! Let's go Blues! Let's go Blues!
I'm Guy, also known as the Y Blues fan, saying aloha mahalo. And you got to know that I am bleeding blue with you. And I'll see you next time on the BlueNote Fan Report. Aloha!